Hello everyone and welcome to Homestead for a Living. By now I'm sure that every single person in the YouTube sphere is very familiar with what's happening in Ohio, and I don't want to add to the noise of that event because I'm not really sure what is true and what isn't in regards to both the denial of issues and the hysteria. In reality, I suspect that over the coming decades we'll come to find that the truth lies somewhere in between. I know that Ohio is already completely polluted with agricultural runoff. Pesticides and herbicides and toxic chemicals are nothing new in that water table, unfortunately. So rather, I'd like to make a video about some of the broader concepts that this brings up. And I'd also like to point out two videos, and I'll post links to them. One is from our friend Billy over at Permapasture, who did a great video about some of the previous attacks from the government using very similar chemicals, such as Agent Orange in Vietnam, and the true devastation that continues to wreak even to this day in that country, and the many cancers it causes and issues in the environment there. Because in reality, these kinds of attacks on the earth and its people have been going on for many decades and will only continue. There's a book here that's one of my primary survival guides that talks a lot about the times we're in, regardless of whether these are what we think of as the end times or an end times, because many people thought World War II or previous pandemics and plagues or previous wars, earthquakes, they all thought that was the end times. But rather than reject them as wrong, I would say that they were right. Those patterns played out very similar to what you would find in Revelation or Daniel, and if you followed the instructions in there, that will carry you through. And so that is a very useful survival guide, and it talks about the waters being poisoned and things like that. I also want to point out a second video, and all that to say that, to the people in Vietnam, that probably very much felt like an end of the world, much like we feel that pattern playing out here. And then I wanted to point out another video from a content creator that I just started following, Growthfully with Jenna, and she does a really good video about some remediation strategies and solutions with plants such as hemp and sunflower and things like that. So solutions are really important right now, and so I'll post a link to that as well. But I also want to talk about some of these bigger concepts. My wife and I had a conversation about it after we saw what was happening, and we know that this kind of behavior from our so-called leadership, or the people that consider themselves leaders or rulers, is going to continue. They're going to continue this kind of attack upon us. If you look at their stated ideology and policy, such as Agenda 2030, they intend to push people out of rural areas. They intend to attack those in rural areas, and those who are self-sufficient, push them into their controllable totalitarian cities. And so we have to expect this kind of thing. Unfortunately, that's a reality. And here's a very sad, hard reality that homesteaders need to accept and work around, which is that your location may no longer be safe someday. I've long rejected that prepper notion of a bug out bag because I was like, I'll stay and I'll fight for my land. But how are you going to fight against chemicals for your land? You've already lost that battle. Or if a nuclear reactor melts down, how are you going to fight against that? However, I think we should also be aware that they may simply put out propaganda that these things are happening. What's the difference between a nuclear reactor melting down or them just saying one is melting down and then saying, hey, oh, the wind pushed it in this 50-mile radius, so this whole area of Tennessee or Alabama, you all need to evacuate, and don't worry, we'll buy your land for pennies on the dollar, and you can go live in one of our smart cities. And so that's why it's a call for education, for understanding a lot of these chemicals, and for nuclear warfare, and for buying Geiger counters and things like that, and starting to learn how to test soil. I know it seems like a lot of knowledge we have to learn, but unfortunately these are the times we're in. And speaking of knowledge, I think it's really important because if you have to pick up and leave someday and flee somewhere, the one thing you know that you can take with you, you might not be able to take your farm or your fruit trees, although I would still suggest planting fruit trees even in this age of temporality, because you can take those cuttings with you, and those trees might be there for when you return or somebody else returns. We still need to think long term and treat our land as if we'll be here in the long term. But anyway, if you have to pick up and leave, the one thing you know you can take with you is the knowledge that's in your head. And so it's a call to put value up here where you're going to keep it. As long as your head is on your shoulders, in which case you're alive, you can keep that knowledge and you can use it. And so building knowledge and skills right now is the best survival strategy for these times. If you know how to build a water catchment system, which is not difficult, or if you know how to do bioremediation of soil, or you know how to grow food, or you know how to work with basic electronics or mechanical things, if you can do any of these things, these basic valued skills, you can take that, and wherever you land, whether it's Argentina or the Amazon or Tennessee or Oregon or California or Colorado, wherever you go, you can take that with you and you will have value, and you can trade that value for food and security and the things that we need to live and to protect your family. So the single best prep is to educate yourself and to continue educating yourself until the day you die. Gabby and I both talk about that, and we both set out educational goals for ourselves. And for us, education is just something that never ends. It's a part of your day, it's a part of your week, and it should be just like the rest of your work. It's something that you schedule and include. and it makes you more valuable. I've really seen it play out in these last 2 years or these last 3 to 4 years as I've really enhanced my permaculture knowledge and some specialty subfields within that. I've seen the amount of money that I can make from those things, or the amount of value I can generate, really increase because I just keep getting more skills and more knowledge in my head, and I no longer really have to chase work comes to me. And so we really overthink, I think, how hard it is to survive. In reality, you just have to become good at some things. You should be versatile, but you should also specialize in some things. So think about what you're good at, what you enjoy doing, what is your brain made to do, and then train it to do more of that. So just a thought there, and a thought that also we should all really study up on bioremediation and become knowledgeable about that, because the poisoning of our earth is not going to stop. Our government and the corporations that control it are not going to stop their tax on us. Just like Monsanto created that chemical to poison Vietnam with and to end their world, those very same actors continue to try to end our world in order to build their own version of utopia, which is you enslaved under their control. So everyone should prepare, but also don't be fearful, because once again, this survival guide gives us a lot of good directions. It talks about fleeing, it talks about the waters being poisoned, it talks about a lot of this stuff, but it also talks about how this earth is truly temporary. It doesn't mean we don't grow, it doesn't mean we don't prepare for the future and try to repair this world, because we are stewards of it, but we're stewards of something that's temporary here, and it's going to go away, and we're going to go elsewhere afterwards. And so just make sure that you are following Christ, not just believing, but believing in Christ means following. It means doing the things he said to do. So read the New Testament, read Matthew, read things like that, and then do them. And you will survive, even if your body is killed off, or even if you get some sickness. It doesn't matter. There's no despair, there's no hell, there's no terror, there's no fear or anxiety in Christ. And you can simply go through this life and observe everything happening and learn from it and challenge yourself and have a wonderful experience while you're here, regardless of what the circumstances are. So hopefully that's useful to y'all. In the meantime, stay safe, be well, and happy homesteading.